Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming along tonight. Appreciate that. So let's go through the formalities of getting this meeting underway. So tonight's governance meeting. So there's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass doors behind you and to my left, and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster over the river at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recording of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and audio live streamed via the council's website. You'll be pleased to know we're not on TV tonight. Okay, so that's fine. But only for a little while. We soon will be on TV for all our meetings. So the Westgate Gardens on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public should leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. So with those formalities out of the way, Andrew, apologies for tonight.
We have apologies from Councillors Lee Castle and Joe House.
Thank you. Any substitute members?
Yes, we have Councillor Michael Dixie here as a substitute for Councillor Castle and Councillor David Thomas as a substitute for Councillor House. Excellent.
So we've got a full meeting. That's really good. So declarations of interest by members or officers?
None in advance, Chair.
Thank you. Has anybody got any declarations they want to raise tonight before we start? Okay. Any declarations of interest that you want to raise now? Yeah, Councillor Carnac.
Just to note that I'm the chair of the scrutiny subcommittee. Thank you.
Yeah, good point.
And in that vein, Chair, I'm chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, possibly soon to be renamed.
I think we got the picture of that. That's really good. So thank you for that. Do we have any public participation tonight?
No public speakers this evening, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there any comments about the minutes of the previous meeting, or shall we take those as general assent to be approved? Okay, we're all happy with that? Thank you very much for that. So item 6 now is to review the council scrutiny arrangements. And I'm going to ask Matthew Archer to go through the changes that are here. We've got plenty of time to ask questions or work through any issues that you want to raise to make sure we're all absolutely clear with what we're going to vote on after the introduction. So this is I think, some sensible arrangements for the scrutiny arrangements, or sensible scrutiny arrangements. So let's see where we go. So Matthew, if you can take over for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the proposals here are twofold. The first is responding to a desire from the leadership to strengthen our scrutiny arrangements, and we've had to think about how we might do that. The first proposal is looking at the status of the scrutiny subcommittee with a proposal to make it, or to grant it, full committee status. Currently, the way that it works, sort of based on the sort of legal framework, is that the scrutiny subcommittee derives its powers from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. They are effectively handed to them. And by making it a full committee, that would mean that its powers are derived directly from full council. And that gives full council then greater control, if you like, about how those arrangements work. No changes are proposed to the terms of reference of each of those committees. So Overview and Scrutiny traditionally has done the sort of policy influencing role. So it's looking at pre-decision scrutiny for decisions on the way through to Cabinet. And it's also done the working group oversight, again with a view to shaping policy and making recommendations through to Cabinet or whoever the policymakers might be. The Scrutiny Subcommittee has a multifaceted role, primarily holding the Cabinet to account, looking at the performance of the Council as a whole, and offering that check and challenge on whether policies are working and being delivered, It has the call-in role. It's also the designated committee for the crime and disorder plan and the community safety partnership. And all of those would remain within the scrutiny remit. So if agreed, so that we don't get too confused with our terminology, the proposal is that we would rename Scrutiny Sub as the Scrutiny Committee and rename Overview and Scrutiny as the Overview Committee. And that way, hopefully, we're all clear which committee we're talking about. And that is actually a reversion to the arrangements that we had the last time that we had the leader and cabinet model back in the sort of early 2010s. The second proposal is looking at the adoption of an overview, scrutiny and cabinet protocol. And this is something that a number of councils have. They all look quite different. So the one that we've put together here, it's very much a sort of, it's the starter for 10, if you like, or something that might grow and develop over time. It describes the way that overview, scrutiny and cabinet will interact with each other. And it's looking at primarily the main change that would arise from this protocol is the way that the cabinet members would interact at the overview committee and at the scrutiny committee as well. So at the moment at the overview committee, cabinet members come along and observe, but they don't participate. And the rationale for that, which dates back some years, is that if they are there, then they become the focal point for debate, and it's not a debate among the committee. And it can become quite political, quite adversarial, not necessarily the sort of rounded debate that you're looking for at your overview committee. So that has been the concern in the past. However, I think looking around at what other councils are doing, thinking about how the sort of the culture of the council here has changed over time, actually the feeling is that the overview committee would benefit from having that cabinet member input into their debates, but very much on the terms of the chair of the overview committee. So they would manage cabinet member interaction, they would bring them in at their own discretion. But the idea is then that the cabinet member would be there to answer questions, maybe clarify political points about why certain recommendations are framed the way that they are. It's also an opportunity because the public are there, obviously speaking at the to the items at the overview committee. It's an opportunity for the cabinet members who are there to hear firsthand what's being said by the public as well. So that change would take effect if this protocol were to be adopted. On the scrutiny side, it's slightly different already in that we do have cabinet members present and participating in those meetings where they're being held to account. One of the suggestions, though, is that we would try and formalise that a little. So if, for example, the scrutiny committee wanted a particular cabinet member there, they do have the power to summon them if they wish that member to be there so that they can answer questions. So we would introduce that as a formal process so that people are clear if they particularly want that a cabinet member there, that there is a formal process for doing that, which the Democratic Services team would coordinate. Aside from that, though, we would have an informal arrangement that cabinet members would be present, representatives would be present to answer questions, and it might not necessarily be the portfolio holder every time, but certainly we would make sure, or the cabinet would make sure, that a designated person is there to speak to each report, if that's felt necessary. And as part of the briefing that we have in advance of the meeting, if it's agreed that maybe this doesn't necessarily need representation, then it can be dealt with by the officers who are present. So it's an experimental year just to see how that goes. The suggestion is that we look at this again in 12 months' time to see whether it's working the way we hope it will. There was one other point I was going to make, and I can't remember what it was. Yes, I think it was just to say that where we've got cabinet members attending informally, The way that that debate would work, we would have the cabinet members sitting within the inner chamber here, so that it helps the debate and they can be heard, and it's clear that they're there for questioning. And then any members of the public who are present in the galleries can understand that they are part of the meeting. That was the last point I wanted to make. So that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Matthew. It's this bit of a rundown there. I think really welcome now comments from we've got 2 chairs of the regional committees as part of our committee tonight, which will be really helpful, and other comments as well. Bearing in mind what we said, it's the year's trial to make sure that we have got this right, and we want to be an open and interactive council. We hope these will move a little bit towards that. So yeah, comments please. And then Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the paper on these proposals. I just would like a bit of clarity on the protocol regarding cabinet members in the overview committee, and the number of times that you would hear from a cabinet member in any one meeting. And this is it's a minor sort of, not a concern or a complaint, but a minor issue. I suppose I've just been thinking through, at what point would the chair sort of cut off contributions from a cabinet member, or would that cabinet member have unlimited opportunities to contribute? Because there's a very, very good reason for having them in the debate, and I'm not questioning that. I'm just thinking about how that debate flows openly and vigorously without the cabinet members' contribution, aside from their initial contribution.
I'll leave that with that, because I think that's a really good point. But if we come back to these more holistically, we might take the first 3 or 4 comments, but that's a really good point, and I think that needs thinking about. Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that, I was wondering about the sanctions is a strong word, but what's to prevent the cabinet member deciding that he doesn't want to attend, or he or she does not wish to attend? Are there any sanctions that could be put in place if they decided that they wanted to keep their head down and not attend? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bland. Was it Councillor Bland? Oh, Councillor, sorry, I misheard.
Thank you, Alan. First of all, I welcome these proposals. Okay. First of all, I welcome these proposals. I never really got my head around why we had overview and scrutiny, and then scrutiny is a sub of overview and scrutiny. It didn't really appear terribly logical. So I think welcome these, and I also the changes in clarifying the role of through the protocol. I think that again is a very positive step. So I'm sure there's some details to be maybe to tidy up as per the questions which have been asked, but on the whole, and if you recommend this, propose this, Alan, I will second it.
Thank you for that. Perhaps we should do that now, actually. It'd probably be quite a good idea. So I will propose the recommendations in for the changes to the scrutiny arrangements, and I understand from our conversation that Councillor Dixie will second that. So that's gotten those formalities out of the way. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to say, what if the cabinet member can't make it because of other commitments, but they kind of, someone else would take their place and help out on that side of it. That's the way I understand it. Thank you.
Councillor Carnac.
Sorry, I knew that was going to happen. Oh, sorry, I'll sort that out in a minute. Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, I welcome these proposals as well. We've had a little bit of time now to work with both overview and scrutiny sub, see how it works. And there have definitely been some issues, and I think scrutiny sub is one of those. I think making its own committee is a really good move, rather than it just being a sub, because scrutiny shouldn't be a sub. And I think also finding our way, particularly between two different administrations. So I've been on both sides, having to be there and answering questions, and now as chair. And I think there's certainly a lot more that we can do with scrutiny, which we're working on at the moment. And I think that will give us the flexibility here to operate more along the lines that other councils run their scrutiny committees, where we're able to bring in outside experts as well as cabinet members and have some different reports coming, and maybe do some deep dives in areas that are of interest to all members. And I very much, invite the participation as well, not only cabinet members, but all councillors to come along to scrutiny, because I think we get some, so far already, some of the briefings we've been having on homelessness and temporary accommodation, those have all come out as a result of the scrutiny sub requesting those. And there are always some really good papers that come through at scrutiny as well that I think are probably really useful for all members. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to working with this. And then just on overview, I'd just like to add, I think it is really useful to have cabinet members to come along. I always used to find it incredibly frustrating to sit there while things are being discussed and you're thinking, but I could answer that, because especially if it's a political steer that you've given and the officer can't answer that I think it's much better. One of the recent ones was on the corporate plan. But obviously for the officer, it was impossible to answer it because it was a political steer question. And if the cabinet members had been able to be here and answer that, I think it would have probably saved us quite a bit of time at committee as well in understanding the reasoning behind those decisions. So yeah, I'm very supportive of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I kind of was cringing from the other point of view there on the corporate plan as well, Rachel. So I understand exactly where you were coming from, and it's a good example actually how this should make it a lot better, shouldn't it? I think coming back to Councillor Prentice's sort of point about, and obviously the other point about what happens if you don't turn up. I don't see that as a problem probably. But I do get the point that in the future, there may be somebody that doesn't choose to do that. And I think the chair could probably refer that matter to the leader of the council to be resolved. I think there's no excuse for sort of doing it deliberately, and clearly, quite rightly, Matthew points out the point that, it may well be that somebody's on holiday or something, but somebody else can take that lead, and I don't think anyone's going to worry about that. That's fine. But there's some deliberate avoidance of that question. I think the leader of the council must take that view in conjunction with the chair of the committee, and that's possibly a solution. Councillor Carney.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, this will be an issue for Councillor Prentice now, but at the recent scrutiny sub, I asked 2 cabinet members to be here. One was working, it was their birthday. So I just said, well, that's fine, don't worry about it. And they said they'd listen back anyway. And we agreed that if there was anything, we'd take it to them, but there wasn't really, it was fine. And as it was, you as leader was there, and also Councillor Nolan was there. So if there had been anything, I think on one thing you did actually intervene and answer those questions for us. But I think you just have to have some flexibility, because again, I remember it becomes quite a heavy workload if you're going to cabinet, and then you've got to go to overview, and then you've got to go to scrutiny. So while, and I know we were criticised on occasion for not going to things, but we were listening to it. But I think there has to be some flexibility. We're all busy people as well. And if there's a big issue that comes up, I would expect, when we look at Park and Ride in September, I would expect Councillor Ricketts really to be there. But for a lot of papers, I think we can have flexibility on all of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Prentice, have you got any sort of thoughts following on from that?
I don't think there's much more I want to add. I think my concern would only, it's not really a concern with a big C, but more a small c, is just around how that contribution is managed in the meeting and whether the cabinet member sits, for example, where Matthew sits tonight, or whether the cabinet member sits among the other councillors. And the protocol for the chair to just push back if it's felt that there's more of a free debate needed among the councillors on the committee. But I guess that's something that maybe can be worked through and doesn't really need a huge discussion tonight. But I'm broadly content. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Paul, for that. Matthew, do you want to just do some summing up for us and come with some comments as well, please?
Yes. So just on your point, Councillor Prentice, we have said in there that that cabinet member participation will be directed by the committee chair. So you absolutely have that discretion. The idea is that the cabinet member is there primarily to be in listening mode and to hear the debate, and to be able to answer questions and maybe some introductory remarks as well, if invited. So we wondered about trying to sort of codify this and say, you know, it would be limited to maybe an introduction, and however you try and do that, I think you restrict the ability of the chair then to just read the room and decide how best to govern. And you know, I think that's best left with you as chair to do. So absolutely, if you think you've heard enough from your cabinet member, then you have the ability to just say thank you very much. Appreciate all your contributions. I'm going to let others speak now. You can let them down gently. Yes, I mean, I think the important principle that the chair runs the meeting. So yes, I mean, on both committees, that's absolutely the case.
I think that's, yeah, and if we get problems for the year, then we deal with them. But I like that idea that the chair should be chairing, shouldn't it? And we'll see how it goes. I mean, we need to do that. Sorry?
Just on Councillor Stockley's point, I didn't cover that. So there is a legal requirement that you can summon a particular councillor to attend. I think Councillor Carnack's points are very well made. That if we are pragmatic, then it does make life easier for everybody, because the stricter the rules, they tend to come back and bite you at some point. So I think if everybody is happy to sort of manage it with a degree of understanding that everybody has lives outside of this chamber as well, then that's very helpful to everyone.
Yeah, I think you, and I think both chairs would have the ability to, of course, discuss it with me if there was something that concerns them, and I think that would be right and proper that you should do so. It'd be direct line to me. I think that's absolutely fine. Are we happy with our understanding so far? And we're happy to. We've obviously had that proposed and seconded as well. So a vote now is to adopt that, and in fact, it's adopted as of council tonight.
Council.
So okay, so it'd be endorsed at council and ratified at council. So after that, it'll be part of the next round of meetings. So okay, I'll leave it to you to go for it. So a vote for is a vote to adopt.
That's yes, that was unanimous. That's carried unanimously. Unfortunately, I've still got Mike Soul in the list, who's obviously not here. So please excuse that as having not voted. That was carried unanimously. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. We're all happy with that. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's deal with item 7 now, which is the speaking arrangements at the planning committee. So again, there's some changes here, which are quite interesting changes. Make sure that before we vote, we're really clear on what they are and how we think will make life a lot better, a lot fairer, and a lot more representative. But we'll see, you can make your own mind up after, again, I'll ask Matthew to explain what the changes are, and then we'll have a bit of a debate afterwards to make sure we're all happy and clear about it before we vote.
Thank you, Chair. So what's proposed here are some minor amendments to the speaking arrangements, basically to add clarity to our rules about who can speak under each of the various categories. I should just be clear that we're not proposing any changes to the number of speakers. We're merely seeking to clarify the rules as they currently stand, and also loosen them very slightly so that the rules are easier to interpret for our Democratic Services team going forward. The reason for bringing these changes forward now are that they follow a recent court hearing where a judge determined that the way that we had interpreted the rules wasn't correct in relation to two speakers who wished to speak on behalf of their organisations. And we said that the criteria in 3.3.1, which is set out on page 21 of the agenda, related to individuals being able to speak, and these people were wanting to not speak as individuals but on behalf of their organisations. What the judge clarified was that the rules as they stood were perfectly fine, so long as an individual speaking on behalf of an organisation was able to speak under 3.3.1. So on page 23 of your agenda, you'll see some proposed changes. They are minor changes highlighted in yellow to the arrangements so that they are clear for everybody and clear for the Democratic Services team moving forward. So the way that this would work in future, if these changes are adopted, is that any person wanting to speak either on their own behalf or on behalf of a group or organisation can register to speak in one of the three slots, for or three against, in 3.3.1. Part 2 of 3.3.2 is unchanged, so those representative slots remain and they are protected for those listed within it, the parish councils, the design forum and the Whitstable Society. The amenity group slot is still there under 3.3.3. It serves a purpose in that if another amenity group wishes to speak, you've still got the 3 for, 3 against that I've already mentioned, but there is then a protected slot in 3.3.3, a lot of points here, that people can, that a group can take advantage of. The small change in 3.4, I'm just going to abbreviate now, is that there is a protected slot there for the applicant or agent. But so that we are clear, if both wished to speak, then we're not restricting the ability of both to come along and speak. In the same way, this is a bit like protecting everybody's rights to come along and make a representation. So again, a slight loosening there means that if both the applicant and the agent wish to speak, one of them will take that protected slot in 3.4. And if there is a slot available under 3.1, they can have it. And if there isn't, then they can't, because other people have got there first. But again, it's a small relaxation that makes the rules easier to administer. Similarly, in 3.5, this was a point made when we were consulting on the rules. We wanted to be clear where councillors who are speaking as if they were a member of the public, where they would fit in if they are being heard. And the councillors will be heard just before the final speaker, who will be the applicant or agent. We've been clear that all slots will be taken on a first-come, first-served basis. Again, so that's for ease of administration. If we start to introduce rules about certain criteria about whether, if two people belong to an organisation, can they speak? Can they both speak? It becomes very difficult to administer these rules. So again, we've made it as simple as we can. In 3.4 proper, not the abbreviated, not 3.3.4. In 3.4, we've made an exception there to the rule that only one person per household can speak. So we've added in there with the exception of elected representatives. And the reason for that is basically the elected representatives have a democratic mandate to come along and represent your constituents. And it seems unnecessarily prescriptive to prevent two councillors who might live in the same household from being able to represent their constituents. So a small exception there won't affect that many people. But again, it seems a sensible relaxation in order to ensure that people are represented by their nominated councillors. And finally, just on 3.6, the change there, we have had examples in the past, very rare, I would say, where people have tried to use more than one speaking slot. So again, we've just added some wording there to try and prevent that and make it crystal clear that everybody is entitled to a 3-minute slot, but no more. So hopefully these small relaxations will help with clarity of the rules and help our Democratic Services team to administer them, bearing in mind that they don't have very long between when the agenda is published and when the speaking slots close. It's about 3 days. And in that time, sometimes if it's a busy agenda or is a particularly controversial item, there's a lot of questions coming in all at once and people expect quick answers. So any difficulty that we have in trying to interpret the rules does not help them or those who are wanting to speak. So I put these to you now. Thank you.
Okay. Any thoughts and comments? I've got Councillor Stockley and was it Councillor Thomas as well? No, just Councillor Stockley to start with then, please.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Matthew. I see the reason for making these changes. I would like a little bit of clarification on 3.33. I wonder what an advisory stroke amenity group actually is. Because obviously that's, I'm on the planning committee and I'm not sure, so.
Let's do that, Matthew. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, it's quite loosely worded, but the idea is that if you are coming along, because the original interpretation of 3.3.1 was that they were for individuals, the intention at the time was that there was a blend of speakers. So you had some individuals, some coming along representing groups, and then some who had a particular democratic interest, either because they're a parish council or they're the applicant or agent. They have a vested interest in the application. So that really was the opportunity for any of the groups not mentioned in 3.3.2 to come along and have a protected slot. They didn't necessarily have to be a defined amenity group. So I think so long as they had some form of sort of mandate to speak on behalf of their group or association, then they were permitted to use that slot.
I'll come back, Chair, briefly, because I was a little concerned about 3.32, because obviously we have parish councils, Canterbury Heritage and Design Forum and the Whitstable Society actually physically named, which will be enshrined in our constitution. Obviously, Herne Bay doesn't have any of the above, so then we move down to 3.33, I guess. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. We did have the Herne Bay Residents Association, but that has now disbanded, and there isn't really an equivalent group currently who could take that slot.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite happy with all the changes, which I think do a good job of clarifying matters. Just got slight concern over some of the original wording, really, in 3.5, where all the slots are taken in those circumstances, which is presumably will be a fairly controversial application. And it says those not speaking shall be provided with the names of the relevant ward councillors and the nominated speakers. Just to have some concerns, just having done 6 hours of GDPR training, that we could be giving out names of people and possibly putting them under some sort of pressure or breaching data protection. I just wondered whether we can take the opportunity to change that and perhaps delete those 4 words and the nominated speakers, and then leave that up to the ward councillors to put those people in touch if that was appropriate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Harvey. Have you got a comment on that, Matthew? I'll come back if you want.
Yes, it's a good point. We've generally done that by consent, so we wouldn't pass details on without the agreement of the person who is speaking. And quite often they are, because they tend to be quite passionate about what they're saying, they are quite happy to try and speak on behalf of others if they feel that there are other important points that otherwise wouldn't be made. So I don't know whether there are any examples of where that hasn't been the case and people have objected, but certainly we wouldn't pass on details without the individual's consent.
Is that okay, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, that is if that rule holds. Just concerned that it's not. If someone could refer us to the guidance here and then kind of demand those names. Appreciate that may never have happened. I might be being overly risk averse, but if.
Do you want to take that?
Yes, I mean we could remove it, and then maybe we would have perhaps an informal arrangement where if we have speakers there, if we know that we've got all slots filled, we could look at maybe speaking to those who are going to speak and see if they are willing to have their name shared. But channeling things through the ward councillor is probably the more appropriate route. So yes, I see no harm in doing that. It's just trying to make it as accessible as possible to those who might otherwise not be able to make their views known.
Be happy to make that minor amendment.
But yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, I think that's fine. Thank you for that.
Can I just check? So we're just taking out the words about and nominated speakers. Yeah,
Yes.
lovely. Just to say, in practice, I think we very rarely give out the nominated speakers' details. We do refer to ward councillors or committee members.
Councillor Thomas.
I've got something floating in my head. I've been on planning for quite a while now, as you know. It probably doesn't. Would there be an advantage of someone organising like a group like the can't think like the Canterbury Forum, open up, I don't know, against something as a group and calling it we're against this party or group or whatever? Would that give them an advantage? Because it's not going to, because as far as I'm aware, it's not going to, because they can still speak as individuals, as a group. Am I making sense? It's not, if they started another, like Herne-based society, let's say, that's not going to give them an advantage, because actually they could still speak as individuals anyway. Is that making any sense? So I'm wondering whether people would have more little groups or something and calling themselves that, and they still might do that and speak as individuals, but say I'm speaking on part of this group. It's in my head and I can't really say the words very well. Sorry.
No, I think I take your point. It's trying to define the difference, isn't it, between an established group, which is the intent of this, who maybe have a constitution or regular meetings, some evidence that they are actually a body that meets as an association of some sort. It's the distinction between that and maybe a sort of a campaign group, if you like, who have just got together for the benefit of that one issue. And I think we would say to those that the slots under 331 are available to them. And the intent of 333 is to try and reserve those for a formal group that actually meets on a regular basis and has some form of arrangements underpinning it.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the juggling is that you know, we've got sort of 3 for and against slots, isn't it? Yeah, and obviously if you're running, if you, as a resident, you will be having a couple of people from the same road speaking. You know, if you got any common sense, you would do that when you use 2 slots or 3 slots even to get over a long point, and that would be able to do that. I guess if we didn't have nominated groups, you would possibly have to have extra 3 slots to take that up, and then they would become a little bit, how many people would be speaking at the planning committee? And I think that's the sort of the judgment that not very many times does Canterbury Society, for example, speak, you know, or Heritage Forum. It's now and again, isn't it, when there's a particularly tricky piece of work, you know, work going on in the city or something, isn't it? So I think that's the reason for it. But otherwise, we'd have to open ourselves up to more speaking slots, which may or may not be a good thing, and that's for us to decide, I suppose, for tonight. So yeah, any other thoughts? Councillor Worley.
I was just going to ask, obviously, picking up the point that David was, Councillor Thomas was talking about, that established groups or groups that have just come together, but obviously we're all aware of some planning applications that may come before us in the near future with groups that have become established quite recently, but by the time the applications are heard, they could be well established, couldn't they? And they could have formed constitutions and had regular meetings and have officers, etc., etc. So, how would that fit into it? I mean, something that was established purely in response to a potential planning application or building of a certain amount of homes, but obviously it's become established over a period of time. How would that fit into the criteria?
I think the hopefully the issue becomes not moot, but close to, because those slots would be available to anybody under 331, and there's 1 slot under 334. So when it's gone, it's gone. And if that means that you've got another objector who is from a group that is, you know, it's impossible for us to judge when is a group not a group, or when is it old enough to have been properly established. So I think that it's one of the reasons why, actually, you know, the more you try and define this, the more you can get caught sometimes by the complexity of your own rules, which again is another reason for trying to simplify them. I mean, when you look at our rules, we actually have we're very generous in terms of the number of people who can come along and speak to each application, compared to many other authorities. But I think it's trying to read the intent and make sure that the rules are applied fairly. That's clearly the critical thing, in order that we avoid challenge.
Yeah, I think it is. We've been sort of running on a similar arrangement for a very long time. So maybe that's a good. Councillor Buckman.
I know, I'll shout it from here. I was just thinking about the speakers and everything. Well, do they have to be filmed, or can they? We'll have to ask them if they need to be filmed.
I think we're going to have some agreement on that, Matthew. Just clarify that if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, as it stands, they will be filmed. So they will form part of our webcast in future. If we have any objections to that, then we will be able to cancel the broadcast while they're speaking. The important thing is that the arrangements in the chamber are as open and as transparent as possible, and that's the thing that has to take primacy over the webcasting.
Yeah, I think that's most especially the case with planning, isn't it? You know, perhaps more than anything. So, any other comments? I'm kind of getting the feel that, yeah, Councillor Stockley.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say that, you know, being on planning, the number of representations we receive, I think, is about right, to be frank. You know, as Rachel was reminding me, at the Hillborough event, or the planning, we had 3 councillors and 3 residents speaking against. So that's 6, 3 minutes each. You do that, do the maths. You know, it can add up to quite a lot, but that equated to a more than fair opportunity to put our objections, I feel. So I think it's about right where we are. Thank you.
Just a point that's come in the past, Matthew. I totally get that. Thank you, Councillor Stockley. You know, if we had some mega, estate being built that was coming through to planning, I presume we've still got the ability to be more flexible over that and to maybe have more representations or to look at that individually, or are we bound by this all the time?
We're bound by this until we decide we're not bound by it. So we had one exception to that, which was the South Canterbury application. And we brought a report to Governance Committee to say, obviously, this is a very significant development in terms of the district impact, and do you want to vary your rules on a one-off basis for this particular application? And they agreed to vary them for that. So there were unlimited speaking slots on that particular occasion for groups and associations. And I think we had about 22 speakers on the night as a result. I think the difficulty is if you try and introduce some element of discretion or flexibility, then you're into questions of fairness again. And also the chances are that lots of applications are controversial, but nonetheless, you can hear most of the points for and against as a committee that you need to within the rules that we've got here. And don't forget that the speakers on the night are supplementing what's already been submitted through written representations and through the officer's report as well. So there are a number of different opportunities for people to make their points, not just on the night.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Matthew. That's some helpful points there. Councillor Carnac.
Yeah, on that note, will there be any flexibility in this for people to pre-record and with the new setup in here for that to be shown, or for them to be able to live stream from home, so that some of these people won't need to come in here, that they could do that remotely? Might also be easier for people then to take part in planning, I think.
Yeah, I know we've had some conversations over that as well. Do you want to just take that away there, please?
Yes, certainly the technology would allow it, and the move to Microsoft Teams would also make it easier for us to administer in terms of the fact that there is a waiting room there, which we didn't have with the old suite. So it's baby steps really. We're trialling now with Cabinet and Council. We hope to roll out to all committees in the chamber in September. We'll see how that goes, and then we can look at the hybrid arrangements. Certainly, we're looking at introducing for officers who are sort of not necessarily our officers, but maybe KCC or external auditors. We're looking at maybe them being able to participate in JTB and audit committee remotely. It would be a natural extension, I think, to then look at public participation beyond that. But it's on the list, but not necessarily something we'll introduce straight away.
Yeah, but we need to bring that back to governance as well.
That might be sensible. We'll have a look at whether it's a tweak or whether it's significant enough that you need to make a formal decision on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. So that's helpful. So we can bear that in mind, and maybe as the governance committee, we take particular note of how the live streaming and stuff goes, so that we can judge that more appropriately if and when it comes back to us. Yeah, I've got Councillor Thomas and then Councillor Carnac. Or do you want to come back on that, Councillor Carnac?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add to that, but I really feel with planning as well that because some people end up sitting here, can sit here for an hour and a half, 2 hours before they get to speak, that this would be maybe a good, something for us to look at governance, because it might just make it easier for people to participate in planning as members of the public, which is probably the committee where members of the public, really want to participate in that. But yeah, it is frustrating if you come along and you have to sit for an hour and a half before it gets to your item.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So I think we keep that on the burner. I think that's a really good point. So, say as Matthew says, probably baby steps is a good way. So maybe in a few months' time we can get that underway, and that'd be really good to trial. Councillor Thomas.
I apologise, this isn't the right meeting to bring this up, but we have photos that come to planning sometimes. Are we able to put those through this system still? Because sometimes we allow it and sometimes we don't. Does that make any, yeah?
Yeah, they used
When
to
the
be.
speakers come in and we had the VDU and that was can that all be linked up? So it's, sometimes we have the photos and sometimes we don't, because we haven't got the technology to link them
They're
through.
emailed in advance, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's a couple of bits, because this is where you slide the photo onto the projector.
Yeah,
isn't it?
normally over there.
Because they
and-
can't be presentations, can they? Yeah. So go for that, Matthew, if you would like.
Thank you.
Yes, just to say that we are cautious about how much information is presented on the night, so that tends to be managed by the officers on the night. So typically they'll be preparing the information for you. Obviously, you see it when you're at the meeting. Hopefully, some of that eliminates the need for site visits, because you then have a visual representation of what the issues are. We wouldn't be looking to enhance that, I think, through the technology, because that would be presentations. So we wouldn't want to steer us down that route.
Sorry, I was bringing back. I'm more of the people speaking.
Yes.
They bring in their own
Yeah.
photos.
So no,
And
I think if they were presenting, because what they'd be doing then is they would be presenting to the committee through slides as part of their speaking slot, and that's not part of the arrangements that we would want to introduce.
But
But
we
you
have
can-
to, but we do that now. That does happen on a planning evening.
Would that? Go on.
Public speakers are allowed to bring in photos, which can be shown on the visualizer. But we say to them, you can bring them in, but it's not a presentation. So you can't tell us when, next slide kind of thing. It's just to illustrate what they're saying. But we do encourage them to actually send photos directly to committee members. If they want to make a point about photos, just send them to the committee members by email and send them to all of them, rather than try and do a presentation on the night. We do say that it's more about the speaking than anything else. But these days, people do want to bring hundreds of photos. They want to illustrate their points. But unfortunately, we have to limit it to just, their words, really, on the night.
So really, what you're saying is that nothing's changing on that. The term is no, yeah,
At the moment,
really,
yes,
for nothing changes at the moment, yeah.
It's something to come back to, but I think if the point of the question is that somehow if you are contributing remotely, you might be disadvantaged compared to somebody who is contributing in person, who might have access to the visualizer, then maybe that's something we would look at overall and have a consistent approach. So maybe circulation in advance would be one way of overcoming that, for example.
And that's something we would need to look at if we bring this back to governance to juggle that arrangement about presenting remotely. So, Councillor Stockley.
Sorry, just in case we're going around in circles. The thought just occurs to me that if the complainant, the resident, is providing us with photos that have not been vetted in any way, that could lead to all sorts of problems with AI, etc. When is a photo and when is it someone's imagination? You see what I mean? We're giving effectively information which may not be correct and no one's vetted, and now we're sitting here looking at our screens at a picture that no one's seen before.
Good point, actually. Isn't it? I mean, I think that's one thing we will pick up. I think we gather that together, I think, Matthew, and we just deal with that. It sounds to me like we need to do a little bit of a tidying up section in separation to this, but, I mean, we're here, we can change. It's the governance is within our remit to do, and, we will do whatever's necessary to make sure we get a fair and reasonable system, and I think that's fine. Yeah, so not complicate things too much tonight. If we're happy with what we've got on paper, then we deal with this as second bite of the cherry, which is sounding to me like it needs to be something we pick up reasonably quickly. That's fine. Any other comments at all? Okay, because I'm pretty happy. I think this is. I've sat and thought about this quite a lot, but having sat in many planning committees, so this is probably a good compromise around. So and we'll see where it goes. But we do need to watch this. Are we going to bring this back again, or shall we bring it back to?
I would suggest that we just adopt these, and then if there is a need to bring anything back in the future, we can deal with that as part of our updates.
That sounds reasonable to me. I think we should keep an open mind. I think all of us are involved, aren't we? So, especially those people on planning committee. So that'd be really good. Okay. Okay. So thank you. I just reminded me I forgot to propose it. So, I'd like to propose these changes that we've debated now. I think they're listed. Let me make sure that's right. So. Yep. So that's in. Yeah. So, just read this out to be absolutely clear. Yeah.
It's just
So
really short.
it's to recommend that the proposed amendments to the planning committee public participation arrangements are adopted. So when we vote for that, that'll be what I'm voting for. So second the please. Thank you, Michael. Michael Dixie to second. So thank you.
Lovely. So that is carried unanimously as well.
Thank you for that, Andrea. Okay, well, that's the agenda items for tonight. So it just remains for me to date and time of the next meeting, unless we have one before then, of course, which we talked about. But we'll do that if and when needed. I'm sure we're all up for that to make sure that we keep things absolutely right. It's going to be 7 p.m. on the 25th February 2025. So it does seem a huge length of time apart, doesn't it? That's what I'm saying. I think we may need that one in the middle of there somewhere, but we'll see where that goes. That's a planned meeting. So, any other urgent business to be dealt with in public? I don't think there is there? No, there's nothing there. So, we've also the exclusion of press and public. We don't need to do that either, do we? So that's item 10 that way. Any urgent business that falls under this exempt provisions? No? Okay, that's jolly good. So, with that, we are going to close the meeting at 8 o'clock, is it?
Yeah.
At 8 o'clock, yeah. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for tonight. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you all soon.